What's the most creative way you got back at someone? A few years ago, I lived in a student apartment in an area with very cold winters. When we chose the apartment, it was because heating was included in our rent and we kept the thermostat set to a cozy 72 degrees. Everything was fine until late November, when the landlord started complaining about heating costs and asked us to turn the heat down to 65 degrees. We agreed, thinking it was reasonable. But shortly after, he demanded it stay on 50 all the time. We arranged a meeting with the landlord and we expressed our feelings about the heating. He didn't take it well, and the next day he installed a locked plastic box over the thermostat, permanently setting it to 50 degrees. We came home to a cool apartment and were furious, but since we didn't want to bother with finding a new apartment, because our current one was close to university and work, we got creative. We filled a bowl of ice cubes and put it over the thermostat at night. It tricked the thermostat into thinking it was much colder inside, so the furnace kept warming the apartment. The landlord couldn't figure out why his heating bill kept climbing, and since we only did it at night, when he came for inspection during the day, nothing was out of the ordinary.
What's the most wholesome secret you are currently hiding? I've started to pretend to not hang up my phone correctly when getting off a call with my daughter-in-law. I then proceeded to talk to my husband about how much I enjoy talking to her and how glad I am that our son chose her. Sometimes I change it with whatever other boost I may think she needs. She doesn't have any family that uplifts her, just the kind that tears her down. I started doing this after my son told me about his wife coming to him in full-on snot tears because I had once butt-dialed her while talking to my husband about her. She stayed on the line to hear what I really thought of her, expecting the worst because that's been her experience of family. Apparently, she was quite touched by the things I said, and my son told me it gave her a confidence boost that lasted weeks, so I do it more often now. Neither of them has any idea I do it on purpose though. They just think I'm getting old and worse at managing my tech.
People who quit their job on the first day. What happened? I went for a job interview as a security guard. A man and a woman asked me my name, asked me how strong I was, then hired me and asked me to start immediately. It was supposed to be a security guard for the storage place. 2 questions in an interview, and I'm employed and working with no discussion about anything else. They took me down to their warehouse and told me to start moving boxers from a shelf into a truck. I said, hang on, the job is security, not manual labor. And then they started getting really shitty with me and saying, if you want the job, then you need to do this as part of it. I was like, okay, I don't mind helping you out, but let's sign the contract first. Then they started throwing bad words at me, like, who am I to demand a contract, and how people like me deserve to be treated as slaves. I just shook my head and left. Turns out there wasn't an actual job. They got evicted from that place and needed to get stuff out of it as soon as possible, and tried to get free labor, and when you turn in for work the next day, you would see empty space.
What's the silliest joke that went too far? When I was in around 6th grade, my mom and my dad separated because they felt like they just didn't have anything in common anymore. They're still best friends. At the time, I was in 6th grade, in the orchestra, and I played the trumpet. Up until then, I had never brought much about it. On April Fool's, I played a simple joke on my mom, saying something similar along the lines of, hey mom, you know how I play trumpet? I remembered my performances in a few days. Sorry, but I just forgot. I was so sure my mom would never believe me and just laugh it off and say something like, yeah, right, but instead, she was ecstatic. She texted everybody in our family and invited all my relatives to watch. I felt extremely bad, so I played along with it and only confessed to my dad. I called him and vividly remember him after listening to my case said, I got you. He called all his friends and their kids to form a band full of high school trumpet players and a conductor. His close friend at work had somewhat of a gym and said he could lend it to us. This was all prepared overnight. We sent my mom the address, and the next day at 5 o'clock, the performance was all set up. Friends of my dad's and their wives filled the stands, acting as the players' parents. For some miracle, my mother was surprised to see my dad there, and somehow they had their spark back, and shortly after, Dad moved back with us.
What's the secret that could ruin your life? I run a cake business and I charge people hundreds for wedding cakes. The thing is, I make them with $2 cake mix I buy from the local Walmart, and to be honest, I suck at baking. Every time I've ever tried to make a cake from scratch, it flopped. It's like my whole life is a lie. People compliment my cakes all the time, telling me how delicious they are and how they could never bake a cake so good. Well, guess what? For a few bucks, they too can make a cake just as delicious. Just add oil, eggs, and water. But in my defense, I love cake decorating. I make all of the frostings and fondant from scratch. I just hate baking cakes. So I base my prices mostly on the decoration of the cakes and not of the cake itself, if that makes sense. But still, no one knows about this except my wife. Even my best friends think I slave over the oven mixing and baking these damn cakes. I've been doing this for years, and if anyone found out, my business and reputation will be in the toilet. I keep telling myself I have to learn how to make the damn cakes without the box mixes, but I never do it.